Our town was quiet, peaceful, a place where nothing much happened. We liked it that way, most of us anyway. But even in a town like ours, there are whispers, stories told in hushed tones, strange occurrences that nobody can explain. I always wanted to believe. There was more to life than met the eye. More than what we saw in our small town. Doug, Dan, Bruce, Sophie and I, we all felt it. We craved the unknown. We were drawn to the mysteries that lurked in the shadows. It all started on a Friday night, and the air was thick with humidity, and the scent of freshly cut grass hung heavy in the air. We gathered at our usual spot, an old, weathered picnic table beneath the sprawling branches of an oak tree. This was our sanctuary, our haven from the mundane. We talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and secrets. But that night, something felt different. A sense of anticipation hung in the air, a feeling that something big was about to happen. "Did you hear about Farmer Nelson's latest crop circle?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The others leaned in, their eyes wide with curiosity. Farmer Nelson's crop circles had become the talk of the town. Strange patterns appeared in his fields overnight, intricate designs etched into the earth. No one could explain how they got there.
What do you think it is? Do you think it's real?
I don't know, but it's creepy, that's for sure.
We spent the next hour discussing the possibilities. Was it a hoax? A message from beyond the stars? Or something else entirely? The more we talked, the more our imaginations ran wild.
We should go check it out tonight.
We all looked at each other, a mixture of fear and excitement in our eyes. This could be our chance to witness something truly extraordinary. Let's do it. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, but in that moment, it didn't matter. We were young, we were curious, and we were ready for anything.
Aliens. It has to be aliens.
We all laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. The idea of aliens landing in our small town seemed impossible, absurd even. But the crop circles were real, and there was no logical explanation for them.
Maybe it's just some kids messing around, trying to scare everyone.
With what? A giant protractor?
She had a point. The crop circles were too intricate, too precise to be the work of pranksters. What about the cattle mutilations? Those are real too, and they're not exactly normal. The others fell silent. The cattle mutilations had started a few weeks earlier. Cows found dead in the fields, drained of blood, their bodies marked with strange symbols. The police were baffled. No one could explain what was happening. We sat there for a long moment, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets. A sense of unease settled over us. We were used to the quiet life of our small town, but now something sinister seemed to be lurking just beneath the surface.
I think we should investigate. We need to find out what's really going on.
We all agreed. We had to do something. This was our town, and whatever was happening, we couldn't just ignore it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. The air was heavy, electric, and the wind howled outside my window like a wild animal. On the radio, the announcer spoke of a storm, a big one, moving in fast. He urged everyone to stay inside to seek shelter, but I knew we wouldn't be staying inside. We had a plan. A storm was coming, yes, but for us, it wasn't a threat. It was an opportunity. The storm would provide cover, a cloak of darkness for our investigation. We would go to Farmer Nelson's field, we would see the crop circles for ourselves, and maybe, just maybe, we would find out who or what was responsible. The storm arrived as predicted. Rain lashed against the windows and thunder shook the house. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at the trees outside. Inside, we huddled together, a mix of nervous energy and anticipation crackling between us.
This is it. Let's go.
We pulled on our raincoats, the thin material, little comfort against the fury of the storm. We piled into Doug's truck, the old engine groaning in protest as we pulled out onto the deserted road. The rain was relentless, a blinding curtain of water illuminated by flashes of lightning. We reached Farmer Nelson's property just as another bolt of lightning split the sky. The crop circles were in the backfield, hidden from the road. We parked the truck under the cover of some trees and set off on foot, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The wind whipped at our faces, making it hard to see, hard to breathe. But we pressed on, driven by a shared sense of purpose. We had come too far to turn back now. We finally reached the edge of the field, our hearts pounding in our chests. The crop circles were even more impressive up close. Perfect circles etched into the swaying corn, as if some giant hand had drawn them there.
This is insane.
As we watched, mesmerized, the wind seemed to pick up, swirling around us like a mini tornado. The air crackled with energy. And then we saw them. Glowing orbs of light appeared above the crop circle, dancing in the air like fireflies. They moved with an eerie grace, a silent ballet against the backdrop of the raging storm. We stood there, speechless, our minds struggling to comprehend what we were seeing.
What are they?
The orbs of light began to descend, slowly at first, then faster and faster, spiraling down towards the center of the crop circle. We huddled together, our eyes glued to the spectacle unfolding before us. That's when we heard it, a low hum, vibrating through the air, through the ground, through our very bones. It was an unsettling sound, alien and yet strangely familiar. Suddenly, figures began to emerge from the cornfield, their bodies barely visible in the darkness. They were small, slender, and moved with a strange, fluid grace. Their eyes, large and black, glinted in the darkness. Panic surged through me. These weren't just lights in the sky. They were real. They were here, and they were coming for us.
Run!
Doug, always the brave one, didn't hesitate. He turned to run, but it was too late. One of the figures lunged, a blur of motion in the darkness, and tackled him to the ground. Doug cried out, a sound quickly swallowed by the storm.
Doug, lay still.
The figure stood over him, a dark silhouette against the flashing sky. We couldn't see what it was doing. We couldn't hear anything over the wind and the rain. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through the adrenaline. My feet felt rooted to the spot.
A high-pitched, desperate sound.
That's when the others ran. Dan first, his face pale and contorted with fear. Then Bruce, close behind. I wanted to run too, to escape the nightmare unfolding before me. But Doug, I couldn't leave him. One of the figures, almost gliding over the wet ground, moved into my path. Its eyes, like black marbles reflecting the stormlight, seemed to bore into me. I felt a strange pull, not physical but something deeper, a sense of overwhelming dread mingled with a bizarre curiosity. A high-pitched whine, barely audible at first, began to rise in pitch. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My vision blurred. The world around me, the storm, the field, even Doug's prone form. It all started to fade. A blinding light erupted from the figure in front of me. I threw up my hands, instinctively trying to shield my eyes. The light was everywhere, searing through my eyelids, burning into my brain. Then, silence. The hum, the wind, the rain. It all ceased. I dared to lower my hands. My vision, still filled with after-images, slowly began to clear. I was no longer in the field. A cold, metallic surface pressed against my back. I sat up, my head throbbing, and looked around. I was in a large circular room. The walls were curved, metallic, and utterly bare. A single bright light emanated from an unseen source above, casting the room in a harsh, sterile glow. I was stripped to my underwear, my clothes gone. Panic welled up inside me, threatening to overwhelm me. Where was I? What had they done with Doug, with my friends? Movement flickered at the edge of my vision. Several of the figures, their skin a pale, almost translucent grey, stood observing me. Their heads were elongated, their eyes large and dark. They moved closer, their movements fluid and silent, and I felt a cold wave of terror wash over me. A sharp, stabbing pain shot through my arm. I cried out, trying to pull away, but it was no use. One of the figures held up a long, needle-like instrument. The last thing I remember before everything went black was a single word, whispered in a language I couldn't understand, but felt in the depths of my being. Experiment. The darkness this time wasn't empty. It pulsed with strange colours, with flashes of images I couldn't quite grasp. I felt adrift, floating in a sea of sensations and sounds that were both alien and disturbingly familiar. I saw flashes of other places, strange landscapes lit by multiple suns. I heard whispers that seemed to come from inside my own head, speaking of galaxies far away, of ancient civilizations and forgotten technologies.
Daughter.
And then, a single image solidified out of the chaos. A face, a woman's face. Her skin was a shade of pale blue, her eyes large and almond-shaped, just like the creatures who had taken me. But her expression was different. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and recognition. A single word echoed in my mind, spoken in a voice that was both hers and my own. Daughter. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vision faded, and I was left alone in the suffocating darkness. I woke with a gasp. My head throbbed. My body ached. I was back in the field. The storm had passed. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a pale light over the scene. Doug, Dan, and Bruce were huddled together a few feet away. They looked as shaken and confused as I felt. We exchanged glances, each of us searching for answers in the other's eyes. What had happened? Was it real? Or had we all shared the same hallucination, a collective nightmare brought on by fear and the fury of the storm? We never spoke of that night. Not really. It became our secret, a shared trauma buried deep within our memories. Life went on. We graduated high school, some of us moved away, chasing dreams and new beginnings, but the memory of that night and the strange, unsettling encounter lingered like a shadow. The crop circles continued to appear year after year, a constant reminder of the mystery that we couldn't solve. Farmer Nelson became a local celebrity, interviewed by newspapers and TV crews from all over the country, but he never had an explanation, not one that made any sense. Years passed. I moved on, or at least I tried to. I built a life for myself, a normal life, far away from the strange occurrences of my childhood, but the memory of that night never truly left me. It haunted my dreams, a recurring nightmare that always ended the same way, with the blinding light, the cold metal, and the whispering voices. Then, one day, it changed. I was visiting my parents back in my hometown. It was a crisp autumn afternoon. The leaves were turning, their vibrant colours a stark contrast to the grey sky. I was walking through the park, lost in thought, when I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the trees, partially obscured by the shadows. I couldn't make out her features, but there was something familiar about her. Something about the way she stood, the way she seemed to watch me. My heart pounded in my chest. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I knew somehow that it was her, the woman from my dreams. She turned then, as if sensing my gaze, and for a fleeting moment our eyes met. Hers were large and dark, almond-shaped, just like the creatures from that night, but there was something else in those eyes. A flicker of recognition, a glimmer of fear. I took a step towards her, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to know who she was, why her image haunted my dreams, why I felt this strange, inexplicable connection to her. But she was gone, vanished into thin air as if she had never been there at all. I searched for her, my mind racing. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was the trauma of that night finally catching up with me? Or was there something more to it? Something I couldn't explain? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen her before, not in this life perhaps, but somewhere, in another time, another place. The dreams intensified after that. The woman, her face clearer now, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing, reached out to me, whispered my name. And then, one night, she spoke. "Find me," she pleaded, "before it's too late." I confided in Sophie. She was the only one who might understand, the only one who wouldn't think I was crazy. We met for coffee at our usual spot, a cozy little cafe downtown. I told her everything, about the dreams, about the woman in the park, about the feeling that I was connected to her somehow.
It sounds strange, I know.
I said, my voice barely a whisper.
But I think she might be my daughter.
Sophie's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise.
Your daughter?
I nodded, my throat tight with emotion.
I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that it's true. The dreams, the connection, it all feels so real.
Sophie took a sip of her coffee, her gaze thoughtful.
Have you told anyone else?
I shook my head.
Who would believe me? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe. Or maybe there's something more to it than we understand.
Sophie, ever the voice of reason, surprised me. She always had a practical explanation for everything. But this was different. She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch firm and reassuring.
Look, I don't know what's going on, but I believe you. And I think you need to find out what's going on, for your sake and for hers.
Night came. The air was still, heavy with the scent of impending rain. I stood in my backyard, the familiar silhouette of the old oak tree looming against the darkening sky. It was here, all those years ago, that our curiosity had led us down a path we never could have imagined. Now, I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, hoping that the woman from my dreams, the woman I believed to be my daughter, would keep her word. The shadows lengthened, twisting familiar shapes into phantoms of our imagination. Doubt gnawed at me. Had I convinced myself of something that wasn't real? Was I chasing ghosts, both figuratively and literally? Then I saw her. She stood at the edge of the trees, bathed in the soft glow of the rising moon. The same pale blue skin, the same large dark eyes. But this time there was no fear in her gaze, only a quiet sadness, a longing that mirrored my own. I took a step towards her, then another. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. The moment of truth.
I'm here. You said to find you.
She didn't speak, but she took a step towards me, then another. The distance between us closed. I could see her more clearly now. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal. She was beautiful, in a way I had never encountered before. I reached out, my hand hovering inches from hers. Her skin, as I touched it, was cool, smooth like polished stone. A jolt, not of electricity, but of something else entirely, passed between us. A recognition, a bond. Memories, not my own, flashed through my mind. Visions of a world bathed in the light of two suns, of cities that shimmered like jewels against a backdrop of purple skies, of a love, fierce and protective, that transcended species and planets. I understood then she was a part of me just as I was a part of her, a product of that night of the experiments of a connection forged in the heart of a Midwestern storm. She reached out and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. A silent invitation. I looked into her eyes, those dark, fathomless pools that held the secrets of stars and galaxies unknown. Together we stepped forward, not into the darkness, but into a light that emanated from within us both. The storm, I knew, was only the beginning. Our journey, however, was just starting.